Hi there, and thank you for coming back for part two of my conversion into the Catholic faith. Um, so in the last video, I talked about my childhood and sort of the disjointed um, faith journey that I was on due to kind of church drama and being a professional musician. We sing all over the place, and so that's an interesting experience. But how my family settled on the Anglican Church as the place that we really attended church the most when I was in high school and then in college. After I graduated from high school, I decided to major in music, in singing specifically. I am now a church musician. I cantor and I sing pretty much any Catholic church that'll have me. But I'm a professional singer, an opera singer, and I went to school for that. And while I was at school, I went to a big university in Illinois. I started singing in what's called the chapel choir at our school, which is incidentally where I met my husband. Meeting a man in church choir is a really good idea, by the way. If anybody's looking for like a way to meet somebody, church choir is great. I know so many people that met their spouse in church choir. Is crazy. My parents actually met in church choir. But I know so many people that did that. So if anybody is like, how can I find a nice man? Join your local church choir. And they'll probably fall into your lap. But so I attended this university for singing. I was singing in a chapel choir at school, which was non-denominational and pretty like kind of wishy-washy theology, I would say. Very, very sweet people, very kind of pacifistic, I would say, like on the pacifist side of things. But it's a very open-minded, very ecumenical church. It was for everybody on campus to go to. And so they didn't really have any strong doctrine or anything like that. And I feel bad calling them wishy-washy. That's not a criticism exactly. It's just, you get the idea. And while I was in college, I did explore evangelical Christianity a little bit. I lived in a dorm. It was a women's dorm, and many of the girls were evangelical Christians. And I did explore that quite a bit, but I was not in a good place to find or deepen my faith in college. I was having a hard time with a lot of emotional struggles, a lot of mental health, really, like anxiety and things like that. And I was really a lost soul in college. I was not a kind person. I was not a good roommate. I was not particularly kind to any of the boys that I dated. It was just sort of, I was just lost. That's the best way to describe it. Just very flaky, unreliable. I did fine in school. I got pretty good grades and graduated with a good GPA and everything, but and I developed my talents quite well and was well respected for my singing in school, but was just not a person of high character, I would say. I don't think I have the best reputation in that community at all, although maybe people have a different view of that. But like I was not, I was sort of just like all over the place emotionally and spiritually, and had no real foundation in the way that I should behave and the way that I should love God through my actions. I met my husband when I was a sophomore in college, and then we ended up dating my junior year, and we did get engaged. And after I got engaged to my husband, I would say like I did feel quite a bit more grounded. But I was still, I was still anxious. I was still kind of all over the place. Couldn't really make heads or tails of my identity or who I was. And little did I know that was because I was being drawn into the Catholic Church. So after I graduated from college, I started singing at a very large Catholic church in downtown Chicago. I also did have a little tour in an Episcopal church that my husband and I attended, but that didn't last terribly long. I met a lot of wonderful people there and really enjoyed singing with them. But I also was hired for some extra services at this amazing Catholic church in downtown Chicago with the most beautiful church music, beautiful church program. And I really got sucked into that. They kind of lured me in, and I ended up singing at this church for a few years. I ended up singing there for 15, but a few years before I converted. In the meantime, we had a baby and did decide to have her baptized in the Episcopal Church, not the Catholic Church. I was not Catholic yet. But when she was a baby, I started really questioning my faith and what it was that God was calling me to do, or what faith community God was calling me to. I started to really wrestle with my Episcopal faith, which was the church that I was a member of, even though I was singing at a different church. But I would attend the Episcopal Church when I could. And I would say that my faith in that denomination was starting to really waver. I had a deep love of them for their music and their all of the Anglican traditions. They have their services so beautiful, and the people are so sweet, and it's such a lovely community in general. The Anglican churches, they're very sweet and open, and, or I should say Episcopal churches in America. We were in America. In England, it would be the Anglican Church. But they're so open and sweet and extremely intelligent group of people generally. So, going to coffee hour and things like that in the Anglican churches, the Episcopal Church is so fun, and people are so smart and so well-spoken and so incredibly friendly. I would say that the Anglicans, the Episcopals are the most friendly church group in this country that I have ever come across. There's no snobbiness. There's no judgment. They're just purely lovey and sweet and kind, but not in your face. They're not trying to convert you. They're not trying to pull you into their community. They're just really happy you're there, and they're very kind people. Like, these are the people that you would love to go hang out with at a dinner party and go out for coffee with. And it's a really beautiful group of people. But I started really wavering, and especially with the foundation of the Anglican Church, I realized that a lot of my ideas as a Protestant were wrong, and I hope that isn't offensive to anybody who is Protestant that's watching this video. But I started to realize how shaky the foundation of Protestantism really was. And even back in college, I was studying a lot of early music. So I was studying a lot of Renaissance music. And so I did quite a bit of research into English church music at the time of the Reformation. Again, my father's English, and so I have a real interest in that country and their culture. And I started to waver because I realized that the Protestant Reformation in England was highly political, and that they did lose a lot of their beautiful traditions. And also that England was a very, very Catholic country before the Reformation. They were deeply Catholic, and they had a deep and profound love for Our Lady. And many Marian antiphons come from England. They have some of the most beautiful pre-Reformation church music, and post-Reformation, Thomas Tallis and people like that. Gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. But the earlier English composers that were writing these stunning masses, I mean, this music it touches the soul in such a profound way. And so I realized that a lot of what I had been taught was wrong, that it was simply wrong. And the people who control the narrative are the people that won that war. England is a lovely country. It's a very open-minded country. But for years, they had banned the Catholic religion. I mean, softly banned it. There were still a ton of Catholics, and it wasn't the kind of persecution that we saw in, other places of the world. But it was persecution, and, they were not allowed to practice their faith. They were not allowed to have priests, especially in parts of the United Kingdom, up in Scotland and places like that. It was very, very severe. And the English, during the Reformation, they stole many things from monasteries. And so that was a very dark time in the history of England. And I do think that because the Protestants won that, and I say Protestant loosely, I mean, the Anglicans are Protestant, but they're not Protestant in the way that the Reformed traditions are. They're more, I would call them more schismatic, although I'm not quite sure what the actual definition of schismatic is. So I'm not a theologian. I'm not an expert in this stuff at all. But to me, they're more of like a schism away from the church because they retain so many of the traditions. And they even had a valid order for a very long time until they changed their ordination practices in the 19th century. So I'm going to say they're more on a schismatic side than they are, Protestant. But a lot of my belief in Protestantism and this idea of sola scriptura and things like that I really thought were true started to fall apart. And I'm not exactly sure why. I was at this Catholic church, which was so beautiful. And I was listening to these sermons every week or these homilies and thinking, there's more to this than I realize. And there's this whole world of Catholics out there, like billions of Catholics. And the next kind of largest religion after that is the Orthodox faith, which is very similar to Catholicism. I mean, the largest block of religion. Protestants, obviously, there's a huge number of them, but like they're in lots of different groups. So the biggest block after the Catholic Church are the Orthodox, which are very similar to the Catholic faith and their apostolic traditions and their sacraments and things like that. And so I was like, okay, something is off here. Something is off with the Episcopalians. But I wasn't quite ready to become Catholic yet. I knew that there was something iffy to me about the Episcopal tradition for me personally, and this is not in any way a slam on anybody who's an Episcopalian. I love you all. I sing for you sometimes still, and I have a deep, deep, deep fondness for Episcopalians, so please don't take this the wrong way. But there was something that just didn't fill me personally in my faith journey there. So I started looking around at more, I'd say like doctrinally heavy Protestant churches. I went back to the church of my childhood, the Mennonite church, and I found one in Chicago they were urban Mennonites, and this is very much not my style. They didn't have traditional hymns or any of that, the traditional stuff that I was used to back in the parish that I went to as a child. And it was very kind of like happy clappy. They were really nice people though, but they had ribbon dancers and things like that. And that's just not, it's just not my style. So we ended up not, sticking with the urban Mennonites. And I started exploring the Orthodox faith, which was very, very significant to me. I loved the Orthodox tradition. I learned a ton about it. I went to Orthodox services when I wasn't singing in the Catholic Church, and I was pretty sure that I wanted to be Orthodox. And I even talked to the priest, and I was going to be brought into the faith on Easter Sunday, chrismated. I think they call it chrismated, their confirmation. And yeah, so I was pretty sure that's what I would do. But then I was singing at Mass at St. John's, this church that I used to attend, and this Catholic church, and I was singing a Dvorak Mass. I believe it was Dvorak. I'm gonna have to double check that, but I'll link it for you guys. It's a beautiful Mass. And when we got to the part where we sang the Credo and talked about believing in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, suddenly it was like a lightning bolt hit me, and I was like, oh, yeah, I believe in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Like, I believe in the Catholic Church. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I can't quite describe it. It was like being struck by lightning. It was a lightning conversion. Which I have since found out actually that these supposed lightning conversions aren't, that the soul moves imperceptibly. And so you can have these what look like a sudden conversion when in fact it's actually that your soul has been led there for a long time, but the movement of the soul is often imperceptible. But to me, intellectually, this was a huge change. And so I talked to my husband, who was not happy. He was not happy at all about this. I think he was kind of dreading that I was going to become Catholic, actually. And he was sort of softly okay with Orthodox. And I think the thing is with the Orthodox Church, at least for me, is it's like becoming Orthodox isn't quite as scary to me because they're not going to get as much pushback from society. People don't really know. I mean, unless you live in a major U.S. city, there aren't a lot of Orthodox churches. There aren't a lot of Orthodox people. It's not. There aren't. It's not a sizable population in America, at least. And so I think when you're an Orthodox, like you can say, "Oh, I'm an Orthodox Christian," and people are like, "I don't know what that means." Okay, fine. And there's a little bit less judgment there. Whereas with the Catholic Church, our scandals and all of these things that have rocked us over the years, it's more of a punching bag of a church. And I don't think it is the most punching bagged church. I can think of several other denominations that are frowned upon more than the Catholic Church. But certainly the hierarchy of the Catholic Church receives a lot of flack in the media, and people are highly critical of it. And I was scared to become Catholic. I didn't want to be Catholic. I was actually very upset when I became Catholic, because I thought, why is this mess of a church God's church? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Well, it's not actually as much of a mess as we think it is. I've come to see this. It's not, we think of it as like this hot mess, but it's not. There's, yes, of course, there's elements that are just terrible, and like very, very, very bad priests from before, especially during the child abuse scandals. And, these are absolute sociopaths, and I can't believe they were part of our faith. But the church today, I would say almost everyone that I know who is involved in the church is there to do good and there to spread the word of Jesus. And but anyway, I'm rambling now. So I came into the Catholic Church. I was confirmed when I was 6 months pregnant with our second child. And I went by myself to that. I was alone at my confirmation. I had my confirmation sponsor, but my husband didn't attend with me. He was having a really hard time with my conversion. And so that is the beginning of my journey in the Catholic faith. And I'm going to talk more about it in the next video. Bye-bye. Thanks.